Today I'm joined by Dick Shone. Dick is the managing director at Boutique Modern, a main contractor and manufacturer of high performance modular buildings dedicated to addressing the affordable housing crisis across the southeast of England. So, welcome, Dick.
Hi, Simon. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
No, thank you for joining me today. Really appreciate it. So, Dick, tell us a little bit more about Boutique Modern.
Boutique Modern was founded 15 years ago originally. I was in a different industry, manufacturing industry rather than construction, and was making furnishing accessories for large retail chains. I ran a factory in Sussex that was producing vast numbers of product for the likes of IKEA and John Lewis, Marks and Spencer's, Debenhams, Tesco's, loads of people. And I was very interested in the economies that could be achieved through repetitive mass manufacture. My kids were at a stage in their lives when they were starting to look to buy or move out of the family home. And obviously, I was well aware of the escalated prices of houses in the UK. I mean, obviously, as a baby boomer, I'd benefited from it, but I was acutely aware that the next generation was suffering from my good fortune. And I was interested in the idea of applying manufacturing principles to house building. Now, the construction industry hasn't moved forward very much, as I've since discovered, but in the research I did before I started the business, hasn't moved forward very much in its ways of working for hundreds of years. Construction is by its nature, a local business. Clay was dug from the ground where the building was going to be built, or stone was cut from the mountain where the building was going to be built, and the stone was used locally. So, Bath stone was used in Bath and London brick was used in London. The construction industry was about gathering local materials and building what you want to build in a constructive way. And it struck me that there was an enormous amount of waste in that process. Generally accepted that there's 25% waste in house building even today, which means they're throwing 1 in 4 houses in a skip, which is quite extraordinary. It explains perhaps why it's so expensive. But also in these days, the carbon intensiveness of construction in its current form is off the chart. It's a massive contributor to the carbon that's produced naturally by the nation. And I just looked into the idea of building indoors. Now, there are people across the world who build indoors. The Japanese build almost all their houses in factories. Obviously, in Scandinavia, where the weather window for construction is very small because of their bleak winters, they build a lot of houses in factories and assemble them very quickly on site. So there was a lot of principles. I mean, in the west coast of America, they build them in factories as well. So a lot of principles I could draw on, but I was very aware that I was working in an environment where we, by tradition, an Englishman's home is his castle. Nothing, it's as safe as bricks and mortar. All those things that we've adopted as our philosophy, actually, when you get into it, it's actually the fundamental structure of the UK economy that bricks and mortar are something you can rely on and invest in, and that principle has been manipulated to underpin a huge amount of the British economy, and accordingly, values have been forced to go up and up and up and up and up in order to maintain the nation's finances. So I knew I was picking a fight with a pretty big beast when I decided that I would try building houses in a factory. And I had to choose the various different processes that we did, because obviously in Japan, they require different things of houses than we do here. In Scandinavia, they have different criteria because of their climate. And so, I knew that I was going to be breaking new ground as well as introducing a strange way to move forward with construction. So that was really the principle of Boutique Modern when I founded it 15 years ago.
I love it. Like, I always love hearing about how people, got into business, why they got into business. But there's a real obviously you saw that opportunity. There's a number of things there: the rising house prices, carbon, you know, contribution, as you sort of said, that made you move into this. Okay, well, look, thank you for that background. I really appreciate you sharing that. And so, had being a business owner always been something that you wanted to do, or was it purely spotting that opportunity that made you sort of change from, right, okay, well, effectively, I'm going to be an employee to be an employer, a business owner?
I had managed a division of a business. That was my previous role before this one. I started my own business when I was about 21. I had experience of running my own business. I was running my own business when I got married, and when the first kid came along, I thought this is too risky. It's both my wife and I were working in the business, and the whole thing at that time was a little bit too scary for me. So I abandoned that and began working as an employee on a PAYE basis. I worked for that same business for a very, very long time. I mean, I had a few false starts initially, but then I stayed with the same business for a very long time. I suppose I had always been slightly entrepreneurial in the way I managed the division that I was working in previously. I don't think I ever had a huge desire to run my own business, but in looking at the problem, the cost of house building, the need as I saw it for a new way to build houses, there was really no alternative at that point. It turns out, Simon, that I was just about 5 years too early. Behind me, 5 years later, there were a number of very highly financed modular housing startups in the UK. There was a kind of bubble that came up about 5 years after I started, for good reason, which I can explain. But and perhaps if I just waited 5 years, I might have got a job with one of them. But I had to plough my own furrow because there wasn't really anyone else doing it, and I wasn't quite sure how far I was going to go with it. But I was, if you know what I mean, I going back to what I was saying earlier about building construction being a local industry, I was keen that what we were doing in Boutique Modern was just adding to the local provision of house building. This bubble that came behind me was kind of based on the automotive industry and the aeronautical industry, where you have one enormous factory which produces houses for a whole region, perhaps for the whole of the UK.
Yeah.
That was never the Boutique Modern way. And also a huge amount of money was spent in those startups on product development and the kind of development in virtual reality, if you know what I mean, of a house product that was then going to be sold to developers and housing providers from a central factory as it happened in the north of England. They were all based in the north.
Okay.
As that came up, Boutique Modern had been in business for 5 years. We might have built perhaps 30 houses by then, and I was very aware of the downside of that. The difficulty in having one central hub, which is producing thousands of houses a year, and when you break it down, you suddenly realise that they're producing 15 houses a day, and then you think you've got 30 massive modules on the M1 every day, and then there's a load of problems which you only really start to see when you start delivery. And you're not seeing it when you're rehearsing manufacture on a computer screen. So Boutique Modern, I started five years earlier in a very different way to the way this sort of bubble that came up behind us, if you know what I mean.
Like interesting there, the two different models, if you like, of establishing a business. Okay. And over the last year, I think you mentioned 15 years you've been in business. What would you say the biggest challenge that you've faced is over those 15 years?
The toughest thing to start off with, and shows just how naive I am, the toughest thing to start off with was you couldn't get a mortgage or a warranty insurance on a modular home in the UK. Okay. The mortgage industry, the warranty industry, I mean, they giggled when I rang them up and said, I'm building a house. The first house I built was going to Scotland, and we were in Brighton. And I said, I'm building a house in Brighton, and it's going to Scotland. Will you give me a warranty on it? They said, no. Simple as that, no. And because of that, mortgages were not available on modular houses. Um,
Has that changed now?
yeah, it has, and this is why this bubble came. With these big companies. 2016, a guy called Mark Farmer, a great guy called Mark Farmer, was commissioned by the government to write a report on the health of the UK construction industry. It was called, basically he titled it "Modernise or Die: The Burning Platform."
Mm.
It was an analysis of the reduction in the number of people who wanted to work, who were working, and who wanted to work in the construction industry in the UK. Figures like the fact that waste is as high as it is, that the average electrician is 50, that there are people dropping out of the industry at a far greater rate than there are people coming into the industry, and that the workforce was not being replaced. That construction was a sort of a waning industry, if you know what I mean. And to some extent, these days you can kind of understand it. I think post-COVID, it's even more emphasised. The number of people who want to go to work in a van and stand in a muddy field laying bricks, it is diminishing. There are less and less of them.
Yeah.
And Mark Farmer's report highlighted this, as well as the carbon impact of conventional construction. And Mark, I've met him a number of times since, just in passing. I've never sort of sat down and debated with him. But Mark was very aware of modular construction in other parts of the UK and the other parts of the world. And he promoted the idea of factory-built houses in this report that he sent to the government. Inevitably, government then looked at this. They decided to incentivize developers, house builders, to use modern methods of construction rather than rely on the old methods.
Yeah.
And there was grant funding from Homes England if modern methods of construction were used. And modern methods of construction might be prefabricated roof trusses, chimney pots, porches, but it can also be panel-built houses, like Huff House, that sort of system where a flat pack is delivered to site and then stood up. And then also there's what they call Category 1 MMC, which is volumetric modular, which is what Boutique Modern was doing at the time and still is now. And that's building a box, for want of a better word, in a factory and finishing the interior of that box as much as we possibly can. We reach about 90%, 92, 93% completion. So when one of these boxes leaves the Boutique Modern factory, the kitchen's fitted, the bathrooms are tiled, the windows are in, the flooring's down, all of that is done. It's all wired and tested, it's all plumbed and tested, the heating's in and the hot water system's in. And these boxes arrive on site and they're assembled into a house.
Yeah, the first time I came across this type of concept was hotels.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly that. They literally built a room in a warehouse, furnished it, everything, with non-movables, and then literally got there and plumbed it in, wired it up to the mains, and done. So yeah, it's a really interesting sort of concept. So okay, and in terms. Sorry,
to finish that,
yeah.
Mark Farmer's report was taken very seriously. They incentivised builders to use Category 1 and other MMC methods. And you can imagine the bandwagon followed, the insurers fell into line, warranties were available, mortgages became available, and bang, we were off and running. That was when Boutique Modern became more mainstream, more accessible for people other than wealthy individuals who we'd worked with.
And that was a real tipping point in the
exactly. And then along came this big bubble behind it.
Okay, right, I'm with you. Thank you for that background. And so, what if you could wave a magic wand and solve one challenge in your business right now? What would that be?
What Boutique Modern needs more than anything else is continuity. We need a pipeline, a reliable, dependable pipeline, perhaps 3 years, 5 years into the future of houses to build. Manufacturing is absolutely reliant on continuity of pipeline, and the way the housing industry is in the UK, there's enough houses needed in the southeast for Boutique Modern to stay busy forever, even probably in two or three more factories. There could be a factory in Kent, there could quite easily be a factory north of in Essex perhaps, or round into Cambridgeshire. There's loads of houses that need building. What I need is a planning system, a procurement system, a commitment for those houses to be ordered from the Boutique Modern factory. And that's what I need, Simon, really, to achieve the price savings that I need, the cost savings I need. Because at the moment, every house that I build is carrying an element of downtime on that factory pipe, on that production line. So Boutique Modern's houses are the same price as the houses you would buy in conventional construction at the moment. We match those. I mean, we're a little bit cheaper, and we're certainly a lot quicker. So you could say we're remarkably cheaper, but we're not achieving what I want to achieve as far as manufacturing economies are concerned, because we aren't rammed full all the time. We've recently won a project for 100 houses in Eastbourne, which has been in the press a lot recently, which that sort of thing will help. But what I need is another 100 houses to stuff up the back of those 100 houses.
Yeah, so that flow. Okay.
Yeah. So if I could have one wish and it would come true, it would be continuity of manufacture.
That flow. Okay. And what would you say is your biggest learning since you've been in business, Dick?
Biggest learn. There's been a lot of things. I mean, man, I qualified as a sculptor, so I've been learning a lot. I've been on a kind of vertical learning curve for the last 10 years. The biggest learning curve has probably been compliances, the need for compliance and the detail involved in main contracting compliance as well as house manufacturing, above ground compliance. That's been a massive learn. Running a business that employs 75 people, that's a huge learning curve. That's taken a lot of time. I hate to say the same as everyone else says, the importance of the people around you. It's so important that you get the right people. I've learned absolutely, completely that the business is only as good as the people around me. It's not, I'm less and less to do with the sort of day-to-day running of the business. And if I've learned anything, it's the importance of them. But there's been so many lessons, Simon, that I couldn't even begin. So,
we could have a whole discussion around that alone. But I think that you're right in the importance of surrounding yourself by great people, and retaining them as well.
Absolutely.
I think
that takes a lot of things. It doesn't just take paying lots of money and bonuses and everything.
Agreed.
It's about shared vision, an energy to succeed. Positivity and the celebration of results. Even when you're under the cosh in one area, if you achieve target or beat it in another, it's sort of pulling everyone up on that. And I've got some great people around me that do that with their teams. So it's a complicated business.
It is, and you're absolutely right. Research has shown that as long as you pay people a fair sort of remuneration, it's the other things that are so important. All the things that you've just sort of shared, interesting work, opportunities to progress their career, training and development, all of those things add to staff retention.
Absolutely, and that's all the way through as well. And that's right down to the last man in the line. It's the whole team, everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Feeling as though they belong to something that's making a difference, like your business actually is, because of the, there's some important things behind there. Not just that we're in business to make money, but actually providing, affordable housing.
One of the most exciting days exciting days in the business I've had so far. As I say, we work locally, we employ locally, our supply chain is very local. We, in the last 7 years, I think, or perhaps a little bit, maybe 5, we've not been more than 35 miles to deliver houses from the factory. In the old days, when we started up, we went to Scotland, as I said, we went to the south of France, we were all over the place. It's getting closer and closer and closer to us all the time. And I remember we just completed a project in Peacehaven, 32 houses in Peacehaven. And one of the guys in the factory sort of grabbed me as I was walking through one day and said, my cousins moved into one of the houses we built in Peacehaven. They love it. They absolutely love it. And that was, for me, was probably one of the biggest, I don't know, buzzes that I've had since I started the business. That, construction is about that. It's about local people building houses, using local materials and local subcontractors for local people. And this chap he wasn't a trained construction worker. He came into the factory with no experience. He learned on the job with Boutique Modern. He got himself into a position where he's running a team now. He's one of 10 people in the factory that run teams of people. And his cousin had moved into the house he'd built. He was so pleased, and it was great. That. That's a massive reward for me.
Yeah, I can imagine the impact that must have, that feeling that must give for that employee, but you hearing it as well.
Yeah.
And look, there's one question that I like to ask everybody that's kind enough to join me on this discussion, Dick, and that is, what is the best advice that you would give to an 18-year-old you?
It says on the wall behind you, follow your dream. It's something like that. You know what I mean? It's go for it. It's sort of seize the day. Don't let them stop you. Don't let them grind you down. All those things.
Yeah.
I've had days where I've forgotten to wash the soap off in the shower because I'm so keen to get my clothes on and go to work. That kind of buzz is such an important thing. And at 18, it's very important. It's very important to maintain it on an ongoing basis. But I think at 18, I would say, go for it. Light the fires and go with them. Look after yourself. Be careful. Don't go too fast, too far. All those things.
Yeah.
But definitely, believe in yourself and push on. Because I think if you can bring that energy, it's very easy to find people who will come with you, and you can defy logic sometimes. You can sit down in a room with tired people who've been buying brick-built houses for 30 years of their careers. And with enough energy, you can persuade them that, yeah, sure, you can build a house in a factory and we can deliver it on a truck and it will be here on Wednesday and it will cost this much. And you can actually convince them and they will buy it in the end. If you push hard enough, they'll buy it. And I think that's the advice I would give people. I think
Thank you very much, Dick. I think that's some great advice there. And look, Dick, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today and sharing more about your business, but also your journey as well. So thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks for having me.